Welcome back. We're going to talk today about covalent nomenclature. You guys have already done ionic. Just to remind you about ionic bonding, that's when you are exchanging electrons so that you become electrically charged and then you attract to one another. And we talked about how do you name ionic compounds with, you say the cation, which is the metal, you just say it outright, so magnesium. And then with the non-metal, you chop off the end and you add IDE to the end, ide. Okay, so if it's an oxygen, it would become oxide, okay, instead of oxygenide, not that. All right, so this is going to have very, very similar rules for covalent bonding, but there's a couple things that you need to memorize. One good thing about this, when you do ionic bonding and I give you the name, you have to like figure out how many charges does this thing have and all that if you wanted to get the chemical symbol. With covalent bonding, it's not quite as difficult. So as long as you memorize these different things I'm about to tell you. All right, so the first thing we're going to start out with is you have the cation and you have the anion. With the anion, you still need to add that whole drop the end, add IDE stuff. All right, so you still need to add ide. But the rest of it, this is where you start memorizing stuff, is all this. All right. If you have one of something, okay, you say mono. So if you have one hydrogen, you would say monohydride or something like that. The only exception to this is you do not say mono when it is the first thing within that covalent compound. Okay, and let me just back up for a second because I misspoke. This is not going to be true because ionic bonding is when you have a cation and an anion. What we have with covalent bonding is usually two non-metals. Okay, remember with ionic it was a metal and a non-metal. When you have two nonmetals, that's covalent bonding. All right, so we're going to say the first element and the second element. Okay, for the second element, you still have to write that ide thing. All right, and you would say mono with whatever the compound is or whatever the element is, unless it is that first element. So there's no mono on the first ones. Di means two, tri means three, tetra means four. Penta means 5, so think like pentagon. Hexa means 6, like hexagon. Hepta means 7. Octa means 8. You can think octopus. There's a lot of octa words. Nona means 9. And then deca is 10. If you can memorize those 10 different prefixes, you're good to go. All right? So we're going to take a look at something. If I had this right here, P4O10. All right. And I needed to figure out how to name it. I needed to look at the first element in there, which is phosphorus. Okay. Except I need to put the prefix on there. And remember back, the prefix for 4 is tetra. All right. So I would call this tetraphosphorus. And then you go to the next element. The next element is oxygen, but remember, since this is the second one, we need to drop the end part and we add ide, so it's going to be an oxide, except we still also need a prefix for this one. So there's prefix here, except for mono, okay, and there is also a prefix here, okay. All right. So this one would be called, again, tetraphosphorus, and then the prefix for 10 is deca, so this would be decaoxide, or some people say decoxide, okay? So tetraphosphorus, decaoxide, all right? We're going to look at another one. This one will be a really common one that you're familiar with. Okay, when you look at that, the first element is carbon. Now, we only have one of it, but again, we don't say monocarbon because it's the first element. So we just say carbon, and then we're implying that there's only one of it. All right, so carbon, and then we have two oxygens. We drop the end part, add ide, ox. ide. Okay, so remember, oxygen, we drop this end part and we add ide. So it's going to be an oxide, but there's two of them, so it's dioxide. So it's carbon dioxide. All right, this is different from carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is just this. Okay, so those are the very, very basics of how you name some of these things. If there are any weird exceptions that come up, there are several different naming systems. So like when you get to acids and things like that, a lot of times when you have this, I'm going to erase real quick. Okay. When I look at stuff like this, it's going to have a slightly different naming system, but we don't have to get all into this right now. I'm just going to give you some basics. This is a polyatomic ion. It's phosphate. Okay, it's the phosphate. What we do with that, though, is because this is an acid. Acids are usually proton donors, so these hydrogens are just protons, pretty much. What we call this is phosphoric acid. Okay. There's different naming though for the different acids. That's the basis of what you need to know. We're going to be using this though. Okay. So focus on this for the covalent compounds. If you see something that is pretty familiar, like water, H2O, you can just call it water. Everybody knows what it is. So. Other than that, if you guys have any questions, let me know. We'll see you later.